The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
And here we are. We're now live for another episode of the Wicked Horror Show. And with us today, we have Yo-Yo.
Hey, everybody.
Our good friend, Patrick.
Hey, everybody. What you don't know is that Leo plays all that music live. So give him a hand.
Oh, thank you. It's very difficult. And my brother from a different mother on a different network, Phil.
How's it going, folks? Good to see you, Leo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Dark Discussions Podcast Network is links down below or up above. And also the guest of the hour, Mr. Michael Penning. Thank you, sir, for joining us tonight.
How you doing, guys? Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
Oh, totally. So a bunch of people watching right now. So if you have any questions or anything, please post it in the comments, and we'll do our best to get it to it. But we want to talk to you about your latest book. So would you like to give a brief synopsis, Michael?
Sure. So my newest book, All Hallows Eve, it's an historical horror book. Takes place in Salem, Massachusetts, 100 years after the witch trials. And it's about a single mother racing against time to rescue her daughter from the vengeful spirit of a woman who was hanged for witchcraft.
Nice. And so the book's available this week on Amazon Prime. And so Goodreads, actually, that's part of Amazon, right? Or no?
Goodreads is separate. It's where you go to review everything. Yeah. So far, the book's been out for a week now. It's got almost all 5 stars on Goodreads. The day it came out, it was the #1 hot new release on Amazon. Got up to #3 bestseller in its category. They got all the different categories. So far, early reviews are really positive. Couldn't be happier at this point. It's been a really good week.
Oh, definitely. I'm about a quarter of the way through it, but it's definitely catching me so far. But Phil, being a horror author as well, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry.
No worries, my friend. No worries. It's all good.
It's been a long day. It's been a long day. Let's talk a little bit about the process. I know you guys probably have a similar process. Michael, you said you were talking about you weren't an English teacher. You were going to become an English teacher, but you ended up writing. You're also a filmmaker as well. Last time we had you was on for Pinup Dolls on Ice.
Yeah.
So what's the process different, like writing for a movie as it is for a book?
What's really nice about writing for a book is that you don't have to think about budget issues. I've been a screenwriter now for about 20 years. Still write movies, do a lot of ghostwriting, sort of script doctoring stuff. All Hallows Eve was actually written as a screenplay about 15 years ago, and it won a bunch of prizes, Creative Screenwriting Magazine, American Screenwriting Association Awards. Got passed around Hollywood, got a lot of producers' attention. Ultimately, they passed on it because of budget issues. It takes place in Salem in 1792, and that takes a lot of money. And because it's a scary ghost story, there's a limited audience for it. So they passed on it, and it sat for a while. But I mean, all the responses were super positive. Everybody loved the story. They just said it would cost too much to produce. So it sat, and then I kind of said, well, it's people obviously like the story, and it's probably too good to sit in a drawer forever. So I'd been toying with the idea of writing a book anyways, just to try something new. And I figured 310 pages of paper cost the same amount no matter what you put on them. So I could let my imagination go as far as I want with it. and happy I did. It's been a great experience, and it's great to finally get the story out there so people can read it. And like I said, so far response has been really good. So that was the process behind getting this one out there. Difference between writing a movie and writing a book. A movie, you've got a finite amount of time, so there's certain plot points you got to hit, and there's not quite formulas, but you want to make sure your pacing is a little bit different. With a book, you can take your time a little bit more with character development. What I did find with writing All Hallows Eve is because I've got that experience of a screenwriter. A lot of the reviews are saying they really like the pacing of it because it moves really quick. And I think that's kind of the influence of having written movies, is that you got to keep people in their seats for an hour and a half and you got to keep them entertained. Whereas with a book, you can put it down and come back to it anytime you want. So I think that really helped with writing the book, just to get that pacing, make it more of a page turner.
Nice. Now, this is taking place in our neck of the woods, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So we were talking a lot. Sorry, my Facebook comments are popping up. Go away. So you're talking about how much research did you do? We're talking about 100 years after Salem witch trials, and how much did you go into the history? Did you use I know the witch's name, was that an actual witch from the trials? Can you go into that?
Yeah. So All Hallows Eve is historically accurate in the sense of the time and place of Salem, 1792. It was a bustling seaport. It'd come a long way since the witch trials. It was one of the biggest kind of towns in New England outside of Boston. A lot of money coming in from trade with the Orient and sea trade. So research-wise, the book is historically accurate in that sense, but I did take a lot of liberties with historical figures. The witch in the book, wasn't one of the ones who was hanged in real life. I know people are sensitive about that. I mean, there was 19 people who were hanged and one pressed to death. And I didn't want to take any sort of liberties with someone who actually existed and who was one of the victims of what happened. So the actual woman in the book is a bit of a sort of an amalgam of a few different real historical persons, but I kind of made up some names there. But there are some definitely historical figures who I didn't mind including their real names. The judge from the witch trials is pretty notorious, and so. But in terms of time and place in 1792 Salem, yeah, I mean, I've been to Salem about a dozen times over 20 years, checking out the places. Even before I ever knew I was going to write a book or a movie about it, I've just been kind of fascinated with the witch trials themselves and kind of the what it says about humanity, right? Like this constant need to find a scapegoat and somebody to blame for whatever might be going wrong around you. In 1692, it was the devil and the witches who worked for the devil. And then throughout history, people have always found someone to blame for the nasty things that are happening. So it's maybe that's what sparked in my imagination, or what sticks with me. But there's just something about the witch trials that just keeps picking at my brain.
Was there any cool pieces of nuggets that you found while doing your research?
The conditions of the witch jail were particularly nasty. I mean, 2 people died while in jail before they were either tried or executed by hanging. But I mean, people had to pay for the price of their jail stay. So you had to pay for the price of your chains while you were there. And if you couldn't, things just got worse. So, there's a scene in the book. There's a few scenes in the book where I take you back into 1692, and you do get a glimpse of what the conditions were like in what they called the witch jail. And there was some cells were no bigger than a broom closet. You couldn't sit down, you couldn't lie down. You spent your entire time on your feet or crouching to sleep. So, and you would spend weeks to months there. So, not particularly pleasant, That would probably some of those conditions. I mean, also a lot of the people who were accused and eventually, tried and hanged, a lot of it was greed. It was, all of a sudden, if you realize, well, my neighbor's got some land that I wouldn't mind having, I'm going to accuse them of witchcraft. And because they hauled you away and then put you on trial later on, sorted it out afterwards, in the meantime, you couldn't pay your bills, and that farmland went up for sale. So, yeah.
Hey, Leo, is it possible I could ask a question to follow up on that?
Totally. That's what I'm here for, Phil.
Very good. Yeah, Mike, you mentioned, obviously, you've been to Salem, Massachusetts a number of times and whatnot, and the Salem witch trials are an oddity in North America. But in Europe, as I'm sure you well know, witch trials happen continuously for decades. Was it specifically just because it was a close locale and a place that you visited that you decided to write this here with the Salem witch trials versus, say, the things that were happening in France and whatnot over in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, especially in Europe, it was the Spanish Inquisition, and that was particularly grisly. Like I didn't put it in the book. I've used it in some unproduced screenplays that I've done and stuff like that about what they were doing to obviously women there, and that's where it got really gruesome. So that was a lot earlier than what was happening in Salem, but mostly it was because the locale. There's something about isolated New England, perched on the shores of the Atlantic, and people just trying to make it through winters. So I think it was the small town aspect of it also at the time, but I think, it was proximity to, where I live. I'm in Eastern Canada, not too far away. I can drive there in about half a day. So, I first got interested in it because I read, Arthur Miller's The Crucible in high school. And, we did a field trip down to Salem, and I was a bratty kid, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, hold up, this is actually kind of interesting. And it just stuck with me since.
I just wanted to add something there as well. I appreciate the fact that you've done research, because so often when you see anything that people are trying to put out regarding the Salem witch trials, it's all burnings.
Yep.
And that's not the case, as you know. And so a lot of time people are just like, well, yeah, that's what everybody thinks, so I don't need to do my research. Let me just throw this out there. And it's nice to hear that, you actually took the time, even if it was like a 2-minute Google, like, how did the witches die in the Salem trials?
That's all it takes.
Because I've seen things where, people are centering something, say they're centering around a specific mythology.
Yeah.
Like, all right, we're going to do a story about a mummy, and what's the god of death in Egyptian mythology? Pretty sure it's Hades. Yeah, go with that. That sounds about right. And it's like, that's a 2-second Google. You could figure that out, and you've ruined your story. Yeah. So when you first went to Salem, were you under that impression, as a kid? Were you like, oh yeah, they did all these witch burnings? Were you surprised to find out about, all the different stories, the more weight line?
Yeah. You know what? I mean, listen, in high school, I didn't know anything about it. And it was, I had a really good English teacher, and she said, we're going to be reading The Crucible, do it. So that was my introduction to witch trials, period. I mean, obviously before that, I kind of thought, you burned witches, right? But I had no idea the difference between what's called the burning times in Europe. And, nobody was burned at the stake anywhere in North America. Hanging was the preferred method of execution. So right from reading then, like, that was kind of my introduction to North American, witch trials, so to speak. So it was no real surprise that they didn't burn witches, because I was just kind of introduced to it as hanging to begin with. But yeah, the more weight line is great. Like that was, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there was one particularly grumpy man who wouldn't either confess or deny. He entered no plea on the charge of witchcraft, and in order to get him to enter a plea, they put a board across his chest. They laid him down. They piled boulders on top of it. They kept saying, "How do you plead?" And he just kept saying, "More weight," because if he knew that if he entered a plea, either they wouldn't believe him anyways, or he'd just plead guilty and then they're going to hang him either way. If he didn't enter any plea, then they couldn't take his land. So his family was able to keep his land. So ultimately, he was crushed to death, and that was his dying words were "more weight."
That is a badass way to go, though.
Pretty bad.
And a nice middle finger to them, because me.
Yeah. There's slight homage to that in All Hallows Eve in my book. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, this area is just so dipped in reach. I'm saying this wrong. Dipped in rich history.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Even, I know you're talking with Steven the other day. He's on the cover of Mystic, on the corner of Mystic. And Phil, you guys go there almost every year. And just this whole area is just insanely, just tons of ghost stories and old houses, and just to think of
it goes with the territory. I mean, it's part of it's some of the oldest settlements in America, really. So when you've got towns with that much history, you're gonna get your ghost stories and folklore. So yeah, it's definitely rich in that. And as a writer, I mean, it's goldmine. Yeah. There's that kernel of something that you hear in passing, and all of a sudden you can just roll with that and develop whatever you want out of it. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of New England history.
Yeah. I found out recently, so there's a road right across the street here that, everybody says is like haunted and stuff like that. But turns out there's a Templar shrine like in the woods, which is pretty cool. And apparently there's multiple Templar shrines in the area.
There you go. Well, I mean, yeah, in your area in Connecticut, we were talking about this earlier on, right? You've got the abandoned remains of Dudleytown, right? Which is like a, old town that was mysteriously abandoned because people were killing themselves and going crazy. So the people thought it was cursed and left, right? So right there's a story, which I actually wrote. I mean, that was my first horror movie that I wrote is based on the legend of Dudleytown. So yeah, it's I love kind of that local folklore stuff where it's that broken telephone thing where it's somebody said something at some point and then it mutates across generations, and then before you know it, yeah, the place is haunted or cursed or needs an exorcist.
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences with personal experiences that make you believe, or you just have a love for the genre?
Nah, I can't think of anything personal. Definitely a love for the genre. I like being scared, and I think that's a universal thing that a lot of people share. I mean, especially people who like horror movies or horror books or roller coasters. I mean, fear feels good sometimes, and I mean chemically too, like biologically, that rush of adrenaline that you get, and then the come down afterwards, that flood of endorphins through your body. It's a rush, and anyone who is in our sort of subculture knows it, right? And you want more and more of it. So I think, I remember, when I was growing up, I was really young in the 80s, and I would walk into like VHS video stores and walk past the rack of horror boxes. And I remember just looking at them and being fascinated with it because it kind of felt taboo. It was like, my parents were like, no, you can't watch those, which obviously makes you want to watch them. And I remember I was in like elementary school, and my buddies and I went over to the local video store, and we were able to convince the guy to rent us the original, the first Friday the 13th. And I completely thought I was getting away with something. I mean, you would think we were like, doing drugs for the first time, right? Because it was like, oh my God, we're not supposed to be doing this. And I mean, it just felt like, you know, we were kind of doing something dangerous. And I think that's what people who like horror, I mean, at least for me, that's why I like horror movies. And that's why I like the horror genre. It's fun to be scared. And in the same way that when you get on a roller coaster, you're pretty sure everything is going to be fine, right? There's always that little fear where, you know, it could go off the rails. And I think that's what kind of horror should be. It should always kind of feel dangerous, you know, and I think that's what draws me to it. Yeah.
Now, is there a specific genre that you find yourself drawn to because it does have that effect where there's something about it where it's like that deep-seated terror? Like, for me, a home invasion thing isn't as scary as, say, like a supernatural, you know, because like I could, you know, somebody breaks into my house, you know, I could punch them. I could, you know, grab a knife from the kitchen. You know, a ghost, you're not going to wrestle to exhaustion, or, you know, a UFO comes down, drags you out. The Fourth Kind, my wife and I watched that when we were first dating. We slept the lights on for 2 weeks. Nothing terrifies me like aliens. I don't know what it is. Nothing terrifies me like aliens. Is there something like that for you?
You know, like scary wise, yeah, I like ghost stories. You know, more atmospheric movies. I really like some of the stuff that James Wan's been doing, you know, where you the slow atmosphere, that creeping kind of dread. That gets to me. You know, as long as you don't punctuate it all with kind of jump scares and stuff. Just there's a lot you can do with visuals and pacing that I think is really scary. But I mean, to riff on your point, one of the things that really scares the crap out of me is home invasion things. Yeah, I mean, yeah, grab the baseball bat, right? But at the same time, there's that, but maybe it's a personality thing for me, but the feeling of helplessness, and especially if something were to happen to my family. Like when I watch movies like that, where it's like, you know, one of the family members has to sit and watch as the bad guy does something to the loved ones, that guts me. That does it, and all of a sudden I'm not having fun anymore because I'm putting, you know, I can kind of put myself in that situation, and that's not fun, you know. That's a different kind of scared, you know, versus ghost stories, more atmospheric things. Those just creep the hell out of me, and I like it. That's fun.
I would also say, you know, home invasion stuff, that's like a almost like an intimate violation as well. Like, this is my home. This is where I'm safe. Nothing's supposed to be able to get me here. It's like pulling the blankets over your head as a kid. Yeah,
exactly. You know, a few years ago, I mean, I live in the suburbs, right? So it's a pretty quiet neighborhood. And a few years ago, we woke up at 5 a.m. and there was a guy banging the hell out of my front door trying to get in. And he must have been high on something because he legitimately thought I was a friend of his and I was not letting him back in the house. I guess I had a party somewhere down the street or something like that. I have no idea how he got to my place. But, I mean, thank God the door was locked. But, yeah, he wouldn't go away. It took about 15 minutes. We had to call the cops. And that was scary because, like you say, there's this sense of I'm supposed to be safe here, you know? And when you don't feel that, then that's a different level of scary, you know? And, you know, okay, coming back to different genres. So, yeah, I like my ghost stories. I like my creepy atmospheric stuff. They don't scare me, but I love slasher movies too, man. That's what I grew up on. It's dumb fun. You know, they can be smart. They can be stupid. They can be entertaining and funny or whatnot, but they're a fun ride. So I got a soft spot for some slasher movies.
There you go.
Let's pose the same question to you guys, Patrick and Philip, for your writing or just genres in general. You know, what do you like?
Bill, you want to go first?
How about you go first, and I'll pick up from after that.
All right. When I'm writing, like there are certain things. It depends, I think, on the scene that I'm trying to kind of get into. There's a lot of historical stuff that you can draw on. If you're trying to, you know, like Michael was saying, like there are some, you know, like some brutal slashers out there, and it seems that some of them are just trying to like go over the top, you know, like the torture porn type stuff that you see in Saw or The Collector. That type of stuff, It's scary, but I too am a student of history, and some of the stuff that us humans used to inflict upon each other. The Judas cradle, for one, is I knew you would know what that was. Like it's basically a pyramid that they kind of lower you on, and you kind of just slowly sit down on it. You're completely naked, and you just sit there and just they let you weigh yourself down, and then they'll put the next person on, and they don't clean it off. It's
what the hell?
Yep.
Yeah, it's Judas Cradle, Catherine wheel is another one where they thread your arms and legs through the spokes of a wheel, and it's like, well, my arms don't do that. Oh, they will when we smash them and shatter all your bones and you've got compound fractures. Then you'll fit. Like there's terrible things that people used to they did this in an episode of Game of Thrones too, where they take a live rat and put it on your chest and then put a bucket over the rat, and then they heat the bucket so the rat has nowhere to go but through your chest, and he eats his way through.
You forgot 1984, the rat in the cage, and you put your head in the cage, and then the rat eats your eyes and so forth. So yeah. That's a well-known one.
Be Nick Cage with the bees.
Well, that's messed up. I thought I forgot what history show I was watching, but it was talking about these pits in the UK back in medieval times that they just toss you in, and most likely you'd break a few bones landing down there, but you're landing on other dead people that were just left there to rot.
Oubliettes.
That's it? Oubliettes?
Yeah, it literally means to forget in French.
To forget, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll put you there and you're gone.
And that's it. Like, put you in like fill a pit with water, and there's you can't quite reach the top, but you can't quite stand on the bottom, so you tread water until you drown. It depends on what I'm writing. That if I'm trying to get like a creepy atmospheric type thing, maybe I'll throw on something like The Lighthouse or The Thing, The Abyss, Alien. Like, I love stuff where you're isolated with no hope of rescue. People out in the middle of in the ocean, like just adrift. Like, I like stuff like that because you don't know what land masses are there. You don't know what's underground. Like Underwater, that film that came out earlier this year, phenomenal because there's so much, in the ocean that we don't know about. Like, I like, that type of stuff kind of like gets my imagination going. Like, I'll watch some of these, documentaries about like strange fish or strange insects. I just learned about, it's called the horror frog or the Wolverine frog, where what it does is when threatened, it will break its own bones to kind of protrude them through its hands and use that to attack whatever is threatening it. Chameleons shoot blood out of their eye to disorient attackers. Like, there's so much, that we can draw on in real life that, like, you really don't need to come up with, like, oh, well, what if this guy, like, he fell down the stairs, but the stairs were covered with razors, and then, but at the bottom of the stairs was like a bunch of lemon juice, and then the guy pours salt on him. Like, there's enough in real life where you can draw from the animal kingdom. Like, there's all kinds of stuff. So it all depends on what I'm looking for, but that's kind of what I do. Phil?
I think the best stuff to read for me anyway, or write for that matter, is when the world, or along with, I guess, personal demons, beat you down, and then the world, it just becomes a bad place because of it. And so, things like the movie Taxi Driver, things like that, where people are just beaten down and become psychos or are psychos. And then the other type is psychopaths in general, not the slasher type, but psychopaths like Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men, or Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones. Folks like that. I think those are the things that I guess disturb me more than supernatural. Though I do have to agree with Patrick on the Greys. Those are my favorite movie monster. So
Yeah, there's nothing scarier than a person, like you were saying. It's the Anton Chigurh, where it's just like they're essentially Terminators, where there's no reasoning, there's no bargaining. It's like, this is what's going to happen. Like that scene with him and Woody Harrelson. It's like, it's brilliant. And, there's not enough of that, high functioning psychopath or high functioning sociopath. Like so many people just want to make them out to be like, oh, we're just going to run around and like stab people in the middle of the street and like, like a Jason or a Michael or a Freddy. But it's the cold calculating ones, like you said, Anton Chigurh, Hannibal Lecter. Like, those are the ones you got to watch out for. The guys that are like, super polite and kind and soft spoken, and then eat your lungs.
Yeah. Even in gangster films like Joe Pesci's character and Goodfellas, things of that nature. I think those type of folks scare me more than supernatural because they exist, right? So I mean, supernatural never really bothers me. I mean, I love my ghost story films and books and whatnot, but real horror that could be real life is the most disturbing, I think. And I'm not talking torture porn, but I'm talking about gangsters and Anton Chigurh type folks and things like that.
Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you are unfamiliar with that dude, look him up. He is scarier than anything you will see in any movie.
Yeah, there's a couple movies of him. I think there's one on Netflix that's pretty good.
Michael Shannon played him in a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can also just search for him on YouTube, and they have like dozens of documentaries about him too.
Mike, you want to get some inspiration for a character? There's a guy, real life.
Check it out. All right.
He got into an argument with somebody in a bar, and he went outside and hung the guy over his shoulder until he was dead. Like, remorseless, like no empathy, nothing.
That's pretty badass.
I just want to break in here for a second, and then we're going to talk to Yo-Yo about what he likes for genre. But I want to remind everybody that All Hallows Eve is out right now. I got a link down below or up above, depending on where you're watching or listening to us, if you're staying tuned for the podcast version of it. So it's available on Amazon Prime if you have what's the Amazon app?
Well, you can get the Kindle. Yeah, if you have a Kindle subscription, you actually get your novel free, it says. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's part of Kindle Unlimited. So if you subscribe to that, you can just go and start reading it right away.
I did buy it.
Nice. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
And also, as always, every single show is brought to you by Diddley Grounds Coffee. They're the ones that help pay the bills around here. So we can't thank them more than ever. We need to support our local businesses. And, their roaster right here in Connecticut makes the absolute best coffee you'll ever have. But if I can find the right button, I need to get rid of the comments here. Hold on 1 second. Bear with me. Here is a zombie talking about coffee.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. There's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
I have to apologize. Jack Shipley and Matt Peterson, it's showing up for your comments as just Facebook user. So I think it might be because on the group for some reason. But a bunch of people over on our YouTube page and also Facebook page. So any questions, if you want to ask Michael about writing or actually any of these guys, because you're all awesome writers. What's that, Yo-Yo?
Don't ask me about writing. You're the wrong person to answer that.
Well, you got your photo blog there.
Yeah.
What's your favorite genre for these creepy stories, Yo-Yo?
See, that's a tough one. Like, I keep thinking about things like Get Out, like the whole not being yourself anymore part. Same thing with like zombies, where something stops you from being you and takes over, and the fact that it's never ending in the zombies. Like something like that bothers me. Like eventually everybody's going to be a zombie in a zombie movie. That's literally the only way that can end. Especially when so you're in a hopeless situation.
Like a Brian Keene novel.
Mm.
Yeah, loss of self is definitely something that, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, anything undead, yeah.
Invasion. I tried watching that when I was a kid, and I couldn't watch it.
The remake is a little bit better because it doesn't have quite so much a happy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say that, and so my favorite movie is JoJo Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. It doesn't have a happy ending.
I think the best movies don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you're a storyteller, you got to let the story tell itself. And sometimes, unless you're writing to a certain plot arc where you want it to get it somewhere, you can give it whatever ending you want. But sometimes it's the story tells you what ending it needs. And I know that one of the conflicted things about All Hallows Eve right now, some of the reviews, the ending is coming up a lot in the reviews, and some people love it, and some people would have liked it to end a little differently. And I'm not giving away any spoilers either way here. And I'm great with that. I like the way it ends, because it feels the way it should. What I don't like in movies or books is when the writer sets everything up that it's going a certain direction, and because they want to kind of shoehorn a twist into it, it's like, oh no, everything that I set up, just ignore it because it was this person instead.
It was all a dream.
Yeah, and I mean, after The Sixth Sense came out, everybody wanted to have the big twist ending in their movie, right? But I mean, to pull that off, it's got to be under your nose the entire time. You should have been able to see it coming, At the very beginning of the movie, the kid tells, I see dead people, So that makes it clever. But if you're setting it all up and you've got all these red herrings going all towards it's this person, and then in the end you say, psych, it's not, it's this person, but I've given you zero evidence at all ever to suspect that person, then you're just cheating. Because it's like, as the audience, you're like, well, why did I watch it then? So sometimes the endings tell you where it needs to go, right? If your characters do and behave the way you've set them up, sometimes it's going to take your story in different directions,
So my question for you, and also for Phil, because I've experienced this myself, have you ever, okay, this is my story, here's my outline, and as you're writing it, you're realizing that your characters are not behaving the way you thought they were going to behave, and you're kind of finding out new things about them, like you created them, and this is the set of personality traits that they have, this is where I think the story is going to go. But as your characters are growing and the story is developing, it takes off in different directions, and it kind of surprises you, almost as if you're reading it for the first time. Do you ever have that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll plan things out. I got my outline. I've got an idea of what the story is going to happen, where it should go. I know who the characters are, and then as I start writing them, I get to know them better, and all of a sudden you start realizing, hold on, if I'm true to what this character would do, he might not save this person, or she might not care about her own family, for example. So, and then that takes you on interesting plot twists, because then you say, okay, well, what if we explore that instead? And I mean, I've completely changed stories by getting to know the characters, and it's become much stronger because of it. They're not doing what I needed them to do for my plot, but it ended up giving me a better plot because of it.
Phil, how about you?
I've been pretty lucky where my characters have not changed too much from the personality traits that I've thought they would have. If things do change, it's the plot itself or things that happen around the characters rather than the characters' personality changes. At least that's what's happened for me. But I do agree with both of you folks that the story sometimes writes itself. So it's really, for me though, it's really more the story writing itself rather than the characters being something different than what I thought.
But doesn't that mean that your characters are just now human at that point, though? That if you're writing a story and how the story is going, their reaction is just different than you would think there would be. Does that just mean that, just wrote a human?
Actually, I see your point there. Yeah, I mean, their reactions will happen generally as I expect when I write my characters. It's just the things that happen to them are the things that are unexpected when the story writes itself. So I don't have like a character that suddenly, I mean, I'm sure and neither of you folks do either, has a character that suddenly changes 180. But if I have a individual that has certain character traits that are basic to their being, I usually don't lose them as I'm writing them, though their reactions will become human, as you said, Yo-Yo, based off of the story events that happen around them. And it's usually the story events that happen around them that have been writing themselves, not the characters. The characters are just reacting to those unexpected plot devices or points that happen as I'm writing.
Yeah, I can see that.
So speaking of writing, what do you guys use for workflow? Any particular app that really helps you out? I mean, what do you use to write?
Michael, why don't you go first?
Okay, yeah. I mean, at first it's pen and paper. That's kind of just plotting things out so I get my pacing right. I still borrow a lot of screenwriting tricks in terms of how to structure a story and getting the beats where they should be. It's what we call them in screenwriting terms, like when things should happen. So, I mean, in terms of programs, I use Final Draft a lot for my screenwriting, and then for writing the novels, it's back to Word. But I've got a whole bunch of spreadsheets and stuff, like, different structure formats that I've created to break things down. So I've got the pacing, and if this doesn't happen by this time, it's going to start getting boring and stuff. So that's kind of the workflow with that. Yeah.
What about you guys?
For me, I just I started using Google Docs for my new job, and I was like, holy crap, this is so great, because I would be doing work on, depending on where I was, I would be doing work on different computers, and I would either email the document or I would copy and paste it and then put that into the body of an email. With the Google Docs, like, whatever it does, it saves, and you can just access that wherever you can access Google. So I can do it on a Mac, I can do it on a PC, I could do it on my phone if I wanted to. So, and I like the fact that it's always saving. Like, pretty much every time you make a change, like you write a sentence, it saves. You write another sentence. Like, that to me is great, because I have lost stuff. I have, I've screwed things up, but I like that. I do something similar to what you do, Michael. It depends on the scope of what I'm writing. Like, if I'm trying to write something where, like my big thing that I'm working on, that I've been working on for 12 years at this point, I have maps, and I have, all these different characters, and I have like, okay, this one's related to this one. This is who they are. Like, I have detailed notes, and, I have the maps of where everything is, so I kind of keep that straight. It's like, okay, this guy's traveling from here to here, and it's going to take him X amount of time, and, there are these types of animals, and there are these types of plants, and, this is like the food that they eat, this is the religion that they follow. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and I have to make sure I can keep myself straight.
Yeah.
But then, like, whenever I have like an idea, it's like, oh, that's a really good idea. Like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, when I'm watching my documentaries about like different fish or insect. It's like, okay, that's cool. I'm going to put that into a larger animal and then, see what we can do with that. Or what if I had semi-sentient plant life that can literally defend itself? Like what if I did this? It's like, and kind of trying to combine different things, but at the same time, make it scientifically accurate. So I have to do the research that goes along with it. So it's like, okay, if this happens, like, oh, I have a vampire character and the character gets, a sword through the, it's like, oh, they get a sword through the left side of their chest. It's like, oh, but they have dextrocardia and their heart is on the right side. So that's why they were able to come back, so you're bringing a character back, but you're also not cheating at the same time.
Yeah.
Like the character would know that, yes, my heart is on the opposite side normally, but the person attacking them doesn't know that. It's like, haha, I just killed this vampire. It's like, haha, you did not. But that's a real thing that really happens in real life. It's kind of why I enjoy the video game The Last of Us, because the fungus that they use, cordyceps, is a real thing. Like it's not transferable into humans. That's where they kind of take.
Thank God.
But you can. It infects ants, turns ants into zombies, and forces the ant to walk over, grasp on.
Actually, one for most bugs.
Yeah, well, I mean, the ants is what they use mostly for examples. Like you clamp onto a plant, the fungus just takes over and then spreads itself from there. Like that's how it reproduces, by infecting the brain of an ant and like just taking it over completely and then shooting spores everywhere. Super terrifying. Like I would not want that to happen to me. And like they use that to kind of create zombies. It's like, this is a real thing that really happens. And it's like, holy shit, that's awful. Like those fish or the parasites that go into the fish mouth and eat the fish's tongue and then live in the fish's mouth. Like, nope, don't want any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's grossing me out. Let's change the subject, Phil.
What virus do you want to talk about?
Well, no, as of software, what do you use?
I just use Word 2003. That's it.
Going old school.
Yep, that's it.
I've asked that question a bunch of times, a bunch of different people. Nobody's ever mentioned Scrivener.
I took a look at it last week, actually.
Oh.
It's cool, but if you got your, if you need to put words on a computer, Word works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, coming back to Patrick, what you were saying about, plotting things out and stuff, I still do kind of like index card technique too. Like I'll have, this is a scene, and then sometimes we're talking about how characters can evolve and change and determine where the story goes. I'll have like the what if questions. So it'll be, this happens in this scene, that'll be on an index card, and then there'll be all the branches. So if the character does this, what would happen? And then there's all the consequences of that. And that leads up to some interesting plot directions. And that's where sometimes, it'll determine that when the story will change, because you start realizing it's a lot more interesting if they choose this instead of this. So it's a little bit of like a choose your own adventure map, but I got them all in my index cards,
It's like a flow chart of consequences.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of mix them up and say, okay, if he does this, then these will be the consequences. And if he does this, it'll be this instead.
Do you ever use some of those unused concepts for other work?
Man, I got like books worth of stuff that I got to figure out how to use. I just got like cool scenes that I just want to write a whole book around, because the scene was just cool. It's too cool to waste, but I don't know where to put it. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of those.
I mean,
a lot of index cards are now gotten digitized, so they've got them like in my Final Draft program. They've got actual index cards that you can type on and stuff. So that's where I'm keeping them all. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's also nothing wrong with it's like making a short film versus a full feature length.
Yeah.
Movie. I'm dropping you in. You have no idea who these people are, what's going on. It's guy at a traffic light. He's in his convertible. He's got the top down. It's a nice day. All of a sudden, this bloody woman with a gun jumps into his car and tells him to drive. Like, what happened? Where'd she come from? I don't know, but here's the story from then on.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly.
So there's always that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're closing up. Got about 7 minutes left, maybe a little bit longer. Let's talk about what you guys have in the works. So, Michael, All Hallows Eve, you were talking previously. I don't know how much you want to mention, but this is book 1.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts without giving too much away of going into book 2, book 3?
Yeah. Okay. So All Hallows Eve is book 1. It's going to definitely be a trilogy. It's the Book of Shadows series, is what I'm calling it, and it's going to follow generations of women in the 19th century New England who use special talents to hunt ghosts and monsters. So All Hallows Eve is the first book in that trilogy. The second one is already written. It's going to be coming out before the end of the year, sometime before Christmas. And the third one I'll be writing this winter, and that should be at about this time next year. I was a huge fan of the X-Files and and Supernatural. I like that a lot too. Like, I like the monster of the week kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it'd be fun to do a series that kind of borrows that sort of overarching plot, with each individual episode being one of the books. But instead of having it be dudes, it's badass women in the 19th century.
Nice.
So there'll be 3 books for sure. And then depending how well the series is doing, and if I feel like keeping it going, I already know what I would do for a 4th one, but I'm going to definitely see how the first 3 go. And then it might be time to step away from historical fiction for a little bit. I got a bunch of other ideas, a little bit, different genre that have been kicking around my head. So it might be time to explore those a little bit.
Sweet. So book 1 is dealing with the Salem witch trials, 100 years past, dealing with ghosts. Do you want to give us a little nugget of book 2? Or
yeah, for sure. So I can't say too much without spoiling.
Totally.
Book 1, but book 2 is going to take place 20 years later. So it's during the War of 1812, and a young woman with a tragic past has to use her knowledge of the occult to save a remote logging town in the Adirondack Mountains where the villagers are killing themselves.
Oh.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's called The Suicide Lake.
Ooh,
Nice.
that's a good title.
Thanks.
What about your film work? Do you have any plans to continue that, or are you going to focus more on writing for now?
Right now, I'm in between projects with films. If something comes up, I'll definitely be taking it on. Right now, I have no idea what's going to be happening. We do a lot of independent films, low budget things, and with everything that's going on with the world right now, I have no idea what funding situations are going to be like for like outside major studios and stuff, getting government funding or any of those kinds of stuff. I mean, right now the government's putting all their money into helping people out. The first thing they're going to cut probably be the arts. So, traditional sources of funding might dry up for independent films. So if projects do come up, absolutely they're doing that. But right now I'm having a really good time working on books. I think that's where my energy's going right now.
Wolfie over on the Facebook group says, Michael, have you heard anything of the new On Ice film? That's one of the last times we had you on was Pinup Girls on Ice, which is awesome movie. We highly recommend you check it out if you haven't. But have you heard anything about them continuing that series? Because the first one was Bikini Girls on Ice.
Bikini Girls on Ice. And the second one was Pinup Dolls on Ice. Yeah, I mean, I still talk to the directors. I don't know if there's any plans anytime in the immediate thing. I know they're working on another project. They got a few things on the go, sort of in development. So fingers crossed, but I think they've stepped away from it for a little bit. But yeah, we might see Mo the Maniac Mechanic again eventually one day.
Yeah, definitely do a research for that. Last time we saw, I think it was Amazon Prime. So I don't know if you can check it out there. Sergio, yes, I did see your comment. I believe we talked about it earlier. And I think that's the rest of the comments. So Philip, what about you? What do you got in the works?
I'm just trying to convert a novella that I've written into a longer length story. So that's where I'm at now. That's pretty much it.
What about your Dark Discussions podcast? Any big projects coming up on that?
Well, we just wrapped up our Westworld podcast, and so the folks who are interested in that show, we do a weekly discussion of every episode. But generally, weekly episodes of the Dark Discussions podcast, and then monthly episodes of Halloween Boutique Psychotronic reviews and Cinema a la carte, which are basically movie review podcasts. And then we also have a monthly episode of classic sci-fi or horror novels that we discuss as well, and that's part of the Dark Discussions extra episodes.
Nice. Wolfie says he wants roller derby queens on ice.
I think roller skates on ice might be tricky.
Yeah.
I'll pass it on.
What about you, Patrick?
I am currently in the midst of a multiple episode long series that I'm doing on the Shark Bites podcast, covering the films of Mel Brooks. We did this week's episode was Blazing Saddles. We talked a lot about that. Learned that John Wayne and Richard Pryor were supposed to be in it instead of Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder, which that would have been insane. But we got tomorrow. We are interviewing on Throwdown Thursday. We are interviewing author Drew Murray on his first book called Broken Genius, and we're just doing that. And I am currently working on improving my script for the movie that would have been shooting right around now, but unfortunately is not because of everything going on in the world. But that is called Proposition 666, where a very devout Christian man, conservative, meets with the literal devil in a coffee shop, and she tries to recruit him onto her side for the upcoming war between heaven and hell.
Wow, nice.
I wrote the part of the devil specifically for my wife.
Nice. Yo.
Hey.
I know you're not writing anything, but what do you got going on? How you been doing?
Just been working and doing the shows.
Okay.
Not much else going on.
Being a good cat dad.
I tried my best.
Well, we'll wrap things up here. So, Michael, where do you like people following you? Where do you like fans interacting with you?
Sure. I mean, first place to go to is my website, michaelpenning.com. Sign up for the mailing list. I don't send out too much stuff, only the good stuff. So that's a great place to get all the news information, updates, free giveaways. I'm also on Facebook, Michael Penning Author, and Instagram, Michael Penning Author. Haven't quite figured out the whole Twitter thing yet. Between everything else, I know how Twitter works. I just don't have time to master it. So right now it'll be Facebook, website, and Instagram.
Yeah. You might want to look into Buffer. Buffer sort of allows you to write to all of them. And it's pretty cool. You can just throw down your thoughts, and then they'll say, do you want to change this message for Twitter, for Facebook, or whatever? So you can go in and add your different hashtags. Makes posting to social so much easier.
Good to know. I'll be checking that out.
Totally. Philip, where do you like people interacting with you?
They can go to the Dark Discussions podcast Facebook group. They also can go to the website, darkdiscussions.com. And we have an email, darkdiscussions@aol.com.
Okay. AOL. You still use AOL?
Yes. For the email I do, because it's basically, I already have an email for Yahoo and Microsoft and whatnot. So I wanted to have multiple emails from different servers or services so I can have different pages open, because if you have a browser and you log in to say Gmail, then when you go to another tab, you can't log in as a separate person. You actually have to change to like a different internet browser. So it's easier just to have multiple
I hear you.
services.
That's a pain in the ass with Google. You gotta, it sort of like latches onto that account, and then that's why you gotta have multiple. I switch between Firefox and Chrome, and
Exactly. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. But I'll say this though: AOL email is the best spam cleaner. So it really gets rid of all the spam compared to my other emails.
Nice. Patrick.
For me, the easiest thing is throwdownthursdaypodcast.com. You get all the latest episodes, articles, the latest episode of Shark Bites. You have a link to our TeePublic store where we currently are selling cloth face masks as well. That's a service that that TeePublic just started. You can get face masks with our logo on it. Super exciting. I love that. You can check out our Throwdown Thursday podcast Facebook group as well. We're going to be doing another trivia contest in June, giving away some more prizes. One of the prizes we already picked up is a Hellraiser Chatterer Funko. So nice. There's going to be horror. There's going to be Star Wars, Harry Potter, all that good stuff. And if you got a chance to join the last one, you know how much fun it was. But I do promise that we'll fix the messaging issue so people don't get booted out of the chat room.
Nice. Speaking of masks, my wife has she's been out of work, so like the last, I'd say probably 3 weeks, she's been working on perfecting making masks. She got it down to a science now. She's like measuring my face, and it's a perfect mask. It's awesome. Yo.
You lucky bastard. You can find me at Boy Meets Phone on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Also, Yo Saint Laurent on those same social media channels. And did I say Instagram? Yeah, I said Instagram. And of course, you can find me here. And you can find Jasmine here too, apparently.
I want to thank you all for watching this fine evening. Definitely check out the show notes. Check out All Hallows Eve, and the link is right down below or up above, depending on where you're watching or listening to us. And go follow Michael. He definitely has some awesome stuff coming up, and his stuff from before is great as well. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys later. Bye.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.